Guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the game that was played in round 7 of Norwaychess 2024 between the 5-time world champion Magnus Carlsen and #1 rated player FIDE Magnus Carlsen, and currently on live standings, actually the #2 rated player in the world, Hikaru Nakamura. This is going to be the first of these type of videos that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be looking at games that are played in big tournaments by top players. I'm going to be reviewing some of these games, trying to learn one or two things myself. And I'm hoping that as you follow along with these games and as we watch these reviews, just like me, under 2000, we are going to grow and become 2000 and above 2000, and also pick up some ideas for some of the games we are going to be playing in the future. So without wasting any much time, let's jump into these games. This game, we are going to look at the classical portion, and then we'll look at an Armageddon. Prior to going into this game, Magnus Carlsen is actually leading the tournament 1 point ahead of Hikaru Nakamura, who is the second, who was leading before Magnus overtook him yesterday. So let's see what happens in this game. We are going to jump right in. Hikaru Nakamura with the white pieces opens with d4. Okay, more like you're going into the Queen's Gambit kind of thing. Magnus opens, most popular line, with the knight f6. Hikaru goes c4, Magnus goes e6 here. You must have seen this opening a lot of times. A lot of things are possible here. You can go into the Nimzo-Indian defense. You can go into the Grunfeld here. A lot of possibilities, right? You can play the Grunfeld. You can play the Nimzo-Indian when white goes knight f3, knight c3 rather. So there are a lot of possibilities from this position. This is completely understandable, and we have this on the board. The Nimzo-Indian defense is on the board, and Hikaru plays f3. If you remember, in the game against Prague, Nanda, Hikaru had actually played e3 in this position. So interesting to see. Against Magnus, he plays f3, and I think in the past Hikaru has played this move f3 and lost all the games he played in this line against Magnus. So it's interesting to see that he goes for it again this time around. Maybe he discovered something else. He strikes. Magnus strikes with d5 here. I think d5 really stops white from going e4 in this position. Let me see. Because if you don't play d5, what do you do, right? Some of my games have ended terribly when I didn't know what to do, or when I even tried to play the Queen's Indian like this, and your opponent white just takes the big center in this same-ish variation. Somebody that played this opening recently that you guys may know was one of the Botes sisters, Alexander, I think. She played this opening in one of the tournaments they played recently, where she led the tournament basically almost from the start to the finish. But Magnus strikes in the center. Hikaru goes a3, takes here, c5, takes. Magnus recaptures with the knight, takes. Now it looks like, how do you defend this pawn? I think in my games, and this is one of those moments where I'm learning myself as well, because in my games, if I have gotten to this position, I don't know what to do defending this pawn. And let's see what Hikaru does. Hikaru does not defend the pawn. He just goes e4 here, and computer says e4 is actually a book move and the position is equal. Now what I was thinking was, what if Magnus takes here with the queen? We check. I guess you can go here with the bishop, and the rook is guarded by the queen, but then the queen picks up another pawn on this square. Oh, she can't pick up the pawn because the knight is actually under attack. So what if he takes with the knight? Then you have to move the queen maybe somewhere here and all of that. Okay, so it's an interesting position. It's one that, if you're a beginner chess player or you are around my level of chess, which is technically what most of us are, right? If you're sub 2000, interesting positions like this, where you need to remember, okay, don't panic, just this is the correct move to play. I'm learning that now myself. And Magnus decides to drop the knight back to e7. Hikaru develops the bishop, completely ignoring the pawn. Magnus also castles, and now Hikaru does this. And all of these are best moves, by the way. Magnus develops the knight, Hikaru develops the knight. Computer says that Hikaru should probably just take the knight. I'm not sure what that was going to do, but the position is still equal even here. It calls knight h3 an inaccuracy, but this is the chess.com weak engine, so it probably doesn't even know as much as Hikaru, let's be honest. But the game continues. Magnus develops his pieces. Everybody is basically developing at this point. And in this position, guys, Hikaru goes with his queen here, essentially defending this pawn now. 1, 2, 3 times. So even if Magnus was to bring a rook here, he would not have enough pressure on the pawn. He would need to maybe, I don't know, find a way to bring another piece to add to the attack of this pawn. And for some reason, they decided to repeat moves here. And computer says that is actually the best idea. But after repeating twice, computer says Hikaru could have gone here, Magnus could have gone here, they could have played for some more. But they both know the games well enough. And they decided at this point, okay, we've had enough. That's it. Let's call it a draw. And the game ended peacefully in a draw. All right. That means that they are going to go to an Armageddon here. And in this position, the players agree to a draw, basically. And the game would go into Armageddon. In the Armageddon section, if you remember, one player is going to start with less time, right? The black player starts with 7 minutes on the clock. The white player starts with 10 minutes on the clock, but the black player has draw odds, meaning if the game ends in a draw, then black is the winner, right? Because you started with less time, a 3-minute advantage. They go basically into the same line, but Magnus does not play the Nimzo Indian defense. This time, he plays one of the classical Queen's Gambit declined moves. And we have this position on the board. Now, here, Magnus could have gone with this move. This is, I think, c6 is also a move in this position, if I remember correctly. This is the Carlsbad variation, I think. So c3 is a possible move, but Magnus Carlsen decided that h6 is what he wants. And we have this position. Again, this bishop move just forces white to kind of play this move. Or I guess you could have also moved the queen. There are a lot of alternatives, but Hikaru decides to play this. In my games, I would already be concerned. Hikaru develops the knight, Magnus strikes in the center and just castles out. And generally, watching this game, I was originally going to think, okay, maybe the game will just end in a draw. But if it ends in a draw, Hikaru is going to basically lose, meaning that Magnus will be winning in their head-to-head matchup in this tournament. And that didn't sound very pleasing to me, at least. And I was hoping that Hikaru was going to do more. And he did. He took on that square, they traded here, and Hikaru goes here. A number of us may say, oh, that's a free knight. I've blundered this probably a million times myself, and you just get your queen lost like that, and you lose the game. Against Magnus, if you blunder your queen, GG, right? Hikaru played bishop g6. Great move, attacking the rook. And this bishop is a monster. It's going to be really difficult to get rid of this bishop. You need to reroute your knight somehow. Maybe go here, to try to kick this bishop out of this square. And Hikaru brings back his bishop. Very good moves. One of the things we have to learn, those of us that are beginners or at lower levels than these top players, is these retreating moves with these pieces. Some of us are going to keep this pin here forever, as long as possible. Some of us will try to look for a way to win the free pawn. And of course, win the free pawn he did. He picked up the pawn. And I don't know. At this point, Hikaru is actually just better. Look at this move. I think Magnus was thinking Hikaru is just going to trade here. You go with a tempo on the rook. And I don't know, maybe queen here, trade the queens off. Maybe you bring the rook back to e1. That would have been a good variation, although Hikaru would still be better in that line. But Hikaru found the brilliant move, queen b3, pinning the knight. Well, technically, the knight is not pinned right now, but there's an x-ray on the king along this diagonal. And what do? There's almost no good way. There is literally no good way to defend. You can't do this because then there's going to be a check on this square, right? Winning the queen. Not on this square, by the way. This is a mistake I could make in my games, or maybe some of you could make in your games, because this discovery allows the queen to block. And when you take, well, even if you trade, it doesn't matter. You realize, oops, 1, 2, 3, and black has an extra piece, so it doesn't work, right? So Hikaru found the very correct move, queen here, pinning the knight, and Magnus decided to take. Hikaru went check, picked up the queen, picked up a pawn, and retreated the bishop like this. Now in this position, Hikaru is actually just completely winning. His computer here gives +1 advantage. I think when you use some of the bigger engines, you even get a bigger advantage in this position. Magnus tried to consolidate because he's Magnus. He's Magnus. You wouldn't just beat him just because he's down a piece. He's going to make you work for the win nonetheless. And Magnus began to maneuver his pieces, and he has an advantage in this position, right? There is basically a pass pawn that is matching to become a queen. If somehow, by some stroke of luck, this pawn even gets to d2, if you ask me, if this pawn gets to d2 here, it's going to be really hard, I would think, right, for Hikaru to stop it from queening. So they traded down, and now here we go. Look at this trick. If you play something random, I don't know, if you do something weird, white pushes the pawn, but this is actually okay because now the rook cannot really come down. The rook comes down. You're just going to take and trade like this, which doesn't work. So everything was really under control here. Hikaru really played this game very well. He pushed the pawn to kick out the knight, but computer says that was a slight mistake, perhaps. Hikaru brought back the queen, and this was the big mistake here. Magnus, of course, is going to find the move. The reason why queen here is a bad move is that it does nothing to prevent this check. Right now, it feels like, okay, Magnus is going to go check, and then you will take, and he will take, right? And then the queen will take. But with this rook distracting the queen, if you take the rook, then check, right? Takes. Oh, no, I even forgot that. Sorry. Then there's a fork here, actually. Check. The king has to move. He picks up the queen. Okay, you can take here, but now all of a sudden, black is actually up a knight. He can even take another pawn if he likes. White can try to do something. The whole point is that when you're playing with these guys, you think you're completely winning, and all you need is one mistake, right? It looks like a free rook, but it's not a free rook. You take the rook, you get fucked. I fell to these tactics in the tournament, a tournament I played in Venezuela last year. Someone took one of my pieces with a rook. Of course, at that time, I was pretty bad, worse than I am now. And I was like, I opened my eyes like this on the board. So, oh my God, is that not a free queen? No, but no, it was not a free queen, because immediately I took the queen, he fucked my king and also took my queen. In other words, he got a piece and a queen for a queen, which was bad. So, of course, Hikaru would not do that. Hikaru sacked the queen for the pawn. A brilliant move. Look at that. And traded like this, now emerging 3 pawns for the knight. And white actually has an advantage because you're the only person pushing to try to go make a queen here. The game would continue. And actually, at this point, it's basically a draw. Almost a draw. Hikaru played this rook move. Apparently, it's an inaccuracy. Computer says he should take the pawn. Magnus will take back, and you just move the king aside. And you try to claim that you have something here. You can create another pass pawn here, kind of tie the king down around these pawns, and see what happens from there, right? Basically, it should be a draw from this point. And somebody of Magnus's caliber should be able to hold such a draw. But if you look at the time, if you followed the game, you would know that at this point, Magnus was actually down to almost 2 seconds on the clock, and Hikaru had about 30 seconds. So Hikaru was playing bullet, and Magnus was playing, I don't know what to call it. Okay, either way, they got to this position. Yeah, Magnus went here. They got to this position. Hikaru took the pawn. Magnus took, and Hikaru went here. Effectively making the game a draw by force, because Magnus could just take here, and if you take that pawn, okay, he just takes this pawn, and it is actually black who is better, although rook and knight versus rook. These pawns are not going anywhere. If you ever push this pawn, king will take, knight will take, this pawn will fall, and the game would have been a draw. And if anybody was going to win this game, it's probably going to be black. But that did not happen as we saw during the game. Oops, what have I done? Give me a second, guys. I think my keyboard actually just died on me, and my arrows are no longer working. But I'm going to put the keyboard to charge, and I'm going to use the arrows on chess.com. But alas, none of those happened. Magnus took on this square, Hikaru went here. And in this position, Magnus Carlsen actually flagged. In this position, Magnus Carlsen flagged. He ran out of time, even if this was a completely drawn position. And with that, Hikaru wins the Armageddon section he gets, I think, a half point. He gets half a point. If you win in the Armageddon, you get, I think, half a point. If you win in the classical portion, you get 3 full points. And by winning and getting half a point, Hikaru is now half point close to Magnus, and Magnus is leading the tournament, I think 11 to 10.5 for Hikaru. And we are going to see, based on the results in the game between Fabi or the Alireza game, the Prague game, we are going to see what becomes of this tournament and how all the players perform. All right, and that is that for this game. I have learned a few things. I'm going to look at this game over again. I'm going to be looking at all the other games from all the players, and I'm going to try to review some more games. Hopefully, I'm going to get better and better at doing this, and we will all be able to learn from these games. Until next time, I will see you all with another great recap. Keep playing chess, keep watching games from the absolute best players, and we will learn and become even better. See you guys soon. Please remember to like, remember to subscribe, and leave a comment below. Thank you.